Good day everyone, especially to you Teacher Joy. Today we're going to discuss about culture as action in Symbolic Interactionism, Phenomenology, and Ethnomethodology. So prepare your pen and paper for you to be able to take down some notes throughout our discussion. Let's begin with Kayomo.
Good day, I am Jean Brian P. Kayoma, and I will be the one who's going to discuss or going to report some of the outlines that accords to Chapter 4, Introduction. The term micro is neglected by the scholars due to the way they see it. Now, they visualize micro as part of a divisive discourse showing disagreement which marks out specific intellectual queries and approaches that disregards the antithetical or opposing towards the mainstream social and cultural theory. Now, these perspectives are diverse and sometimes do compete with each other. However, there are also different family resemblances inside of this diverse tradition. These can be summarized as face-to-face interaction between actors that are main feature of social life, and people are creative, intelligent, and as well as knowledgeable. Social order elevates as an accomplishment of actors who can manage encounters and turn them into something that is accessible to predict, successful, and understandable in a way that is mutual. And the last one is the usage of interpretative methodologies, which attempts to catch an individual's or actor's way of defining the situation. This will enable us to inculcate ourselves in terms of how the society functions. This intellectual has 2 points of origin, the positive and negative. Now, the origin under the positive lies in a series of ancestral pragmatism in American philosophy during the first quarter of the 20th century was still essential for the rise of these perspectives. In terms of pragmatism, there were large distinctions among the living among the leading figures. However, the core that is conducive that regards to cultural theory has a correlation with an argument regarding the process of generating the meaning. Now, pragmatists do believe that the knowledge and meaning rely on the context. By the year 1870, Charles Sanders Peirce had already generated a theory that delineated reality as something solely knowable through a system science and representations in which are in a constant practice of knowers. Meaning, ladies and gentlemen, is produced as a process of interaction between 3 elements, which are the sign, the given word, for example, the term dog. Now, the next one is the object. This one is the one that's referred to by the given sign. Now, dog is a certain furry creature with 4 legs and a tail. Now, the given description is quite broad. It is also given that dog is an animal that also has the certain quality described. Next one is the interpretant, described as the idea or understanding produced in an interlocutor when the one that interprets hear the certain word that serves as a sign. Now, Peirce essentially invented the field of semiotics that particularly emphasizes a study of signs. Other thinkers built on this work in a distinctly micro-sociological fashion, despite of the effort of also other thinkers to annihilate it from an interactive context in which Peirce placed it. Charles Cooley's idea, which is the looking glass self, depicts one's imagination of another's perception of themselves. The self is an interactive production in the first place, due to the given reason that we only apprehend ourselves and come to think ourselves in a particular manner, such as being attractive, boring, witty, or ugly. It is through putting ourselves into an imagined perspective in accordance with another perceiving us. Now, the way we understand and develop ourselves pertains on current existing community. On the other hand, George Herbert Mead's notion of taking the role of other illustrates similarity to Cooley's idea, in which as a person we develop ourselves through being pretentious, pretending ourselves to be others. First, to the people that are close to us, like our parents or the significant other, and the generalized other. According to the veryrealmind.com, the theory of mind is an important social cognitive skill that involves the ability to think about mental states, both your own and those of others. It encompasses the ability to attribute mental states, including emotions, desires, beliefs, and knowledge. Now, the argument has been created that people with autism strongly does not hold the definition of and also the function of the specific theory mentioned earlier. They are disabled in terms of making an imaginative leap that is a must in correlation to having a guess or second guess towards the thoughts of other people. This might be one of the catalysts why others seldomly see them as insensitive. But we as an able person must not treat them inferior, for it's just part of their disability, and to assess them, support and understand their situation is the fair and accurate thing to do. American sociologist Herbert Blumer insisted that people are correlated to each other and to objects serving shared meanings as a pedestal. This is a position with which received disagreement from few cultural theorists, but he further insisted that social interactions that an individual has with others is the reason that emphasizes the meaning of such things. The process of how people create and use a meaning is preferable in the focus of understanding action than how the culture itself can inform action patterns and be analytically distinct from them. The theme of prioritizing action over the explanation or exegesis of culture is deeply and well depicted in the work of Irving Goffman, which will be the next topic ought to present by my groupmate.
Good day everyone, my name is April and I'll be the one who will discuss about the author Irving Goffman. Who is Irving Goffman? Irving Goffman was born in Canada but spent most of his professional life in United States after training at Chicago. His work interest in research is in number of fields including the ethology, the anthropology, the psychology, as well as sociology and cultural studies. Irving Goffman was well-read and deep into diverse literatures in search of ideas that could be applied to the study of human behavior. Thus, he is recognized as a uniquely talented observer of social life. He is also the most influential symbolic interactionist. He rose to a prominence with the publication of The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. What would be the content of these books? Let's find out! The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life. This is the first and arguably the most influential work of E. Goffman. Goffman suggested that social action could be studied using an elaborate dramaturgical metaphor, wherein he suggested that the social life is like a stage drama. The aim was to show how the individual in ordinary work situation presents himself and his activity to others, the way in which he guides and controls the impression they form of him, and the kind of things he may and may not do while sustaining his performance. Next, we have the role distance. Parsons sees the actors as inhabiting an internalized role, while Goffman sees the actor as performing role and emphasizes what he calls the role distance. The role distance, according to E. Goffman, refers to the detachment of the performer from the role he or she is performing. This makes an important distinction between the existence of expectations concerning the role performance and the individual commitments to the role. For example, the role of this girl is to pray sincerely, and if you pray sincerely, we commonly close our eyes. But then, this girl is not committed to her role. She acts the complete opposite of what she is expected to do. Next, we have the impression management. E. Goffman argues that people have to make an acceptable show of whatever they are supposed to be doing. This is called impression management. In impression management, the people or the actors are expressing certain information. in order to impress certain ideas towards the audience during the social interaction. And in order for them to express well or impress the people, what will the actors should do? The actors will make use of objects as what we call props. Goffman also suggests that spatial regions have an implication for interaction. There is often a backstage area where they carry out the pose or the hidden from the audience, but which are essential for a smooth front stage performance. Goffman also provides an example wherein there is a skillful waiter that will act out his role before an audience of customer. Supported by the backstage team in the kitchen, he will use props like corkscrews and menus and tries to give off an impression of professional solicitude. So it means that in the front stage, dramatic interaction happens, and in the backstage, it will provide help for establishing the expressing of certain idea towards the audience or the people. The presentation of self in everyday life is of people being ingenious and talented. They are constantly giving up signals to each other. They say who they are and what they are doing and assist actors to maintain a mutually agreed definition of the situation. A danger with this perspective, however, is that the logic of the dramaturgical metaphor leads us perilously close to a simplistic vision of people as fake and frauds, acting strategically to manipulate impressions in order to control other people. Goffman's other works throughout his career also focused on the self and covered a bewildering number of topic areas, and one of his work is The Asylum. His work Asylum focus was on the ways that the self of the mental hospital inmate interacted with the institutional regime. Goffman begins by defining the total institution. So what is total institution? The total institution is a place that is closed up from the world and where every aspect of daily life is controlled, such as the asylum, the army, the prison, and even orphanage. To the ways to such places attempt to transform the self of those who enter them. They do this through a rite of passage. So what is rite of passage? E. Goffman borrowed the concept of Arnold van Gennep, the rite of passage, wherein he noted that major life transitions in all cultures involve ritual processes. He also noted that in many such episodes, there is a period of separation from the group before people return to society with a new status. For example, the honeymoon phase of a married couple. After the wedding, the couple will have a honeymoon stage wherein it is the early part of a couple relationship where everything seems carefree and happy, but this is also a stage wherein the married couple is now separated from their own set of family and create their own family as they return to the society. Goffman observed this universal process at work when a new inmate entered such an institution, a series of activities took place that strip away a civilian identity and replace it with an institutional one. This includes the interview, the photographs, the removal of clothes, disinfecting the body, and putting on a prisoner's uniform. The sum total of this process was a mortification of the old self and emergence of a new identity that suited the needs of the institution. Goffman claimed that a punishment or reward system offered inducements to the inmate to become a conformist and retain a passive demeanor. So what kinds of inducement? Inducements includes visiting rights, a private room, a day release, and so on. While the negative sanctions were things like solitary confinement and electric shock therapy. Goffman subtext documents the various trick roses that inmates get up to in order to maintain their sense of autonomy and dignity. This includes pretending to go along with the rules of the game in order to win privileges or taking part in activity for the wrong reasons. And so, asylum is one of a struggle between the institution and the inmate. Let me share to you some of the quotes of Irving Goffman. For the presentation of self in everyday life, Goffman quoted that choose your self-presentation carefully, for what starts out as a mask may become your face. Because he believed that our socialization consists of learning how to play our assigned roles from other people. And so, we should be careful of choosing our self-presentation in everyday life. Another quote for the topic asylum is he quoted that the society is an asylum run by the inmates. Because we all know that asylum is messy and chaotic. And he described our society like an asylum and controlled by inmates or people who are incapable enough to be in the charge of our society. I hope you learned something, and that's all for my report.
Aside from in the presentation of everyday living in the asylum, Irving Goffman specializes in books about social behavior, so here are some other influential books by him. First is The Interaction Ritual, Essays on Face-to-Face Behavior, published in 1967. It shows what to do when facing people while maintaining a dignity. He suggests that everyday social life consists of small exchanges, small interactions. It could be greetings, nods, handshakes, and where we reaffirm our identities and where we establish our identity as the competent human being that we are. The main point of this book is that it draws an argument from Durkheim's to elementary forms of religious life. He asserts that the person in our urban secular world is allotted a kind of sacredness that is displayed and confirmed by symbolic acts. So we all have the sacredness in us, and it is only confirmed by how you act around people, how you show your manners, how you treat them. The third one is Goffman has this thing called face work. It is the transition of your real self from the individual image that you use to project to the society. So it's a different like an alter ego. And here we perform ways that corresponds to social expectation. For example, the society expects us to use paw and elbow to our elders. Then we should do that too. We fit into the rules in order to save face. The second book is entitled Gender Advertisement, published in 1979. It looks at how men and women are depicted in advertisement. Goffman argues that women are depicted as passive, like let men do whatever they want, do all the things they want, and they also depicted us as supportive of men, like we support them what they do, and whatever their goals are, and also childlike. Well, I'm not surprised about that because women a long time ago or up until now, we are depicted as the weak gender, where we are dependent around men, and while men are deemed as the strong ones, as the independent one. Well, the exact nature of his claims isn't clear. Some have said that it is about gender. It is simply about gender representations in advertising. That's it. While others suggest that it's merely using advertisements as a convenient data source to explore wider social attitudes and embodied behaviors. So it's like the advertisement is only one of the ways to study social behaviors. It is like one of the many ways. Though the exact nature of his claims isn't clear, the book became the gateway of more cultural studies about mass media. Because of this important book, many studies have been conducted about social behaviors and cultural studies about mass media. The third one is frame analysis. Explores the way that context gives a meaning to actions. An example word would be a frame such as play. we read a pretend fight in a different way than real fights. So, for example, when we are watching WWE, worldwide entertainment, with all the wrestlers such as The Rock, John Cena, and all their punchings, and even with all those punches, the kicks, the throwing of things, the headbutts, even with all of those violence, we still know that that is a pretend fight. It isn't real. That is acted. That is scripted. Unlike from a real fight where we see in the streets where they punch, even with the simplest action, we know, even if it's not that fatal, we know it is a real fight. It also focuses on how people maintain and identify social constructions of a reality. Although it focuses on less attention about face-to-face interaction, it is focused on collective representations and symbol systems. For example, if we are on a road driving on a car and we see signs everywhere, we all know that that will be road signs. Not because they are on the road. Yeah, part of that is because they are on the road, but because they give us instruction and what we should do or how we should act while we are on the road.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shara Palabrita. So today I'm going to continue the discussion. My assigned topic is Kaufman and evaluation. I will going to discuss the positive aspects of his work and also the criticism he received according to his works. So again, my topic is Kaufman and evaluation according to the book Cultural Theory, an Introduction by Smith and Riley. So, there are 5 positive aspects of Kaufman's work. Number 1 is human use, culture, interaction. He shows that people use cultural resources to maintain common definition of the situation and offers situationally appropriate behavior. The next one is his focus on links between action, meaning, and the self. So, in some ways, this foreshadows connects or concerns with identity and more recent cultural studies work. So the third one would be his understanding that semiotic was fundamental to social interaction. Kaufman shows that we live in a world where meanings are constantly exchanged, in the sense that it is profoundly cultural model of social life. What is semiotics, by the way? So semiotics are studies of sign processes that involve signs, where a sign is defined as anything that communicates a meaning, that it is not the sign itself, but the sign itself to the sign's interpreter. So the fourth positive aspect in his work is his focus on the ritual aspects of social life institutions and in face-to-face encounters. This mark an important elaboration within the Durkheim tradition. So just like Mr. Durkheim's theory of solidarity, wherein people are interconnected to each other, that also gave sense to the quote, "No man is an island." So it implies that it is good for us or for the society that we should have a face-to-face encounter. So the last one is a recognition of the embodiment of culture. Kaufman's work demonstrates how important that the body is a courier and conveyor of cultural codes and information, which is very accurate because we use cultural codes almost all the time. However, there are some problematic dimensions towards Kaufman's overall. The most important of this that they have intimidated is that his emphasis on role, distance, and performance can create an impression of cynical and strategic acting. Also, his account make extensive use of words like understanding, conventions, and norms. The other one is approach to culture itself did not constitute to in advance. So these are just some of the criticism that his work received. There are multiple criticisms towards Kaufman's works. So here it is. Kaufman's is one of which tends to falsely universalize from the perspective of a white, middle-class male in America. So in this criticism, Kaufman So number one is government. Governments is one of which tends to falsely universalize from the perspective of a white middle-class male in America. It implies that somewhat in government's work, he generalized the perspective of a white middle-class American's views towards the world or towards the society. So in terms of methodology, government tend to rely on anecdotes rather than systematic data collections. So the third one is notwithstanding the institute-level analysis of asylum and the media-based study of gender advertisement, a big question mark hangs over the ability of his approach to inform more macro issues about culture. And the last one is issues of power are neglected. So that's all. So my co-reporters will continue to discuss our topic for you to better understand the culture as action in symbolic interactionism, phenomenology, and ethnomethodology. Thank you.
Now let's move on to labeling theory. Labeling theory is associated with Edwin Lemert and Howard Becker. It was developed mainly in the fields of criminology and health researches during the 1960s. Labeling theory marks an important extension of symbolic interactionism that in many ways deals with some of the major problems we encountered with Kaufman. So, sometimes we had a misunderstanding of Kaufman's theory, Kaufman's logic. So we had this labeling theory to back it up. So what is symbolic interactionism, by the way? It is a theoretical approach to understand the relationship between the human and the society. The basic notion of symbolic interactionism is that human action and interaction are understandable only through the exchange of meaningful communication or symbols. It retains the idea that meanings about selves play a key role in our social life. So how do we understand ourselves? How do we label ourselves? That plays a vital role in our socialization. So for example, you label yourself as an adventurous person. So because you're being adventurous, you're able to go out with a lot of friends, you're being able to try new things with them. That improves your socialization. It also said that there is no such things as a deviant per se. Deviance means separating from the social standards. Rather, there were certain types of person and activities that were classified or labeled as deviant. Becker focused on the ways that lawmaking institutions created deviance by making certain things illegal. So because we label things as illegal, we label things like that, that allows us to separate bad things from good things, thus making a more functioning society. So that is why if you are a lawbreaker, you are considered as a deviant. You are considered as someone who doesn't follow the proper guidelines. So as Becker wrote, the deviant is one to whom that a label has successfully been applied. Deviant behavior is behavior that people so label. So if you're labeled as a deviant, then you are a deviant. Becker's works also stresses that the importance of dominant institution in establishing these laws. For example, the example in the book is about the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, which specializes in drugs. And in the Philippines, we had the PDEA, the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. They enforce laws about illegal drugs, and that is an example of labeling. He argued that they would often do to protect their own interests or where they are assigned. The general thrust of such analysis is to shift our gaze away from the individual deviant toward the study of the social forces that are behind the labeling process. This part is where they contrast with government's interest and mutually reinforcing. Government believes that enforcing something like an agreement, it requires mutual. It requires mutual understanding. It requires the agreement of both parties. But in labeling theories, it suggests that power and interest are determinants of identities. Indeed, labeling theory focuses exclusively on labeling as a form of social control directed against vulnerable classes of persons. We can actually use the law, the law, the laws here. For example, the rich stays at the top of the fair. There is a song about that. It goes like, hanggat marami ang mukmuk sa kahirapan, ang hustisya ay para lang sa mayaman. It suggests that justice is only served for the rich, for those who have the privilege. The poor who are in the slums are not entitled to any justice. They are not sided with the law. So labeling is a form of social control. The government can say, do not do this, do not do that. They will enforce laws against certain things. So as point of contact between symbolic interactionism and other trends in more mainstream culture. So studies of mental illnesses, for example, suggest that the level of mentally ill is used to control persons who are against the government or unconventional. We can relate it in our country. For example, if something doesn't sit right with you of how the government rules, of how they run the country, and you want to strike against it, and you are labeled as buang, howd, or something like that. This shift away from the face-to-face and toward discourse in institutions. Labeling theory is important as point of contact between symbolic interactionism and other trends in more mainstream cultural research. These are clear affinities, for example, with studies of classification.
Good day, everyone. Hi, I'm Junior C. Pawai, and I'll be reporting the Phenomenology. Phenomenology is a philosophical movement originating in the 20th century. Their primary objective, which is the direct investigation and the description of phenomena as a consciously experienced. The field of philosophy, the main focus of analysis and phenomenology is the exploration of conscious experience. It also includes the major figures in the field, who is Descartes, Heidegger, Husserl, and Merleau-Ponty. Edmund Husserl is the best known of these techniques, which is the methodology of briquetting. In his works, Husserl uses in his method of briquetting to remove and account for each of these stages of perceptions and intricate detail. And then, the idea is to purge an experience and to work out on what its constitute elements might be so as to reveal a pure perceptions, attainted by common sense. Husserl would argue that this involves numerous elements, a sense of being a self so that we can be conscious of our perceptions. Students study the Lebenswelt life world of ordinary person. Students were the students of Husserl and sought to make his teachers' findings more relevant to explaining everyday life than to abstruse philosophical controversy. In order to this, students to had take Husserl and stand him on his head by metaphorically speaking. A Lebenswelt made up of the taken for granted and stuff of common sense knowledge, and students suggested that typification was central to this activity. Husserl's intellectual approach, as we have seen, involved taking experience apart and eliminating common sense. Students argue that much of social life is able to go ahead precisely because people do not do this. He calls this belief that reciprocity of perspectives. Students argue that the intersubjectivity or mutual understanding and practical actions can be established because of this assumption, and this way that we group things we experience into classes. And he writes, the outer world is not experienced as the arrangement of individual unique objects, but as mountains, trees, animals, and fellow men, according to Scoots 1973. Students also maintain that our interaction with others are guided by the assumptions that, for the most part, they see the world in the same way that we do.
Good day, everyone. It's me, Annalyn, and I will discuss or report the ethnomethodology. The founder of ethnomethodology is Harold Garfinkel. He wanted a theory that would appreciate the centrality of social action and intelligent actors to preserve social order. But first, what is ethnomethodology? Ethnomethodology was to be the study of the ethno. From the word ethno, it means folk, and the word method, it method, through which ordinary people did this in diverse situation and organizational environment. Garfinkel rejected the Parsonian's emphasis on values and norms as the major origin of integration, insisting that they reduce the actor to the status of a judgmental doe. He also disapproved the abstraction of a single abstract theory being able to account for the diversity of human action, and called instead for concentrated empirical investigation of existing contexts and settings. Garfinkel claimed the social order, particularly in specific settings, as an accomplishment of actors. He saw them working to make their own context-specific action understandable to others. According to Garfinkel, people have to keep making sense of the world and each other and achieve activities that are designed to make sense to each other. Garfinkel insisted on the centrality of common sense in allowing these sense-making activities to happen. He did it through a series of innovative preaching experiments that set out to violate and highlight the significance of the taken for granted. Garfinkel's work revolves around a series of innovative concepts. The significant concept of innovation are account or accountability or accounting. This refers to the ways that people attempt to develop frames and explanation for understanding what is going on. The second one is the etc. clause. Garfinkel attacked the idea that society could be governed by rules. Instead, he pointed out that no rules could ever be specific enough to cover all possible circumstances. Like if rules exist, they could only do so because members applied the other contexts either applied or didn't. The third one is the documentary method. This concept is borrowed by Garfinkel to the sociologist Carl Mannheim. It refers to the way that members build up coherent frames from small clues. The fourth one is indexicality. This is the way that things only make sense within a specific context. Garfinkel implies that because meaning is so context-bound, we have to study it as something that emerging in specific sequences of action in specific places. The last one is ad hocem. It is the concept captures the creative and improvisatory way that people transpose common sense knowledge across domains. Who is Harvey Sachs? Harvey Sachs is the other leading early advocate of ethnomethodology. He emphasizes on the role of language in everyday life. In the role of language in everyday life, Harvey demonstrated that many of the features of social life that Garfinkel had documented were present in ordinary conversation. The idea here is to detect how the kinds of devices identified by Garfinkel and Sachs allow people to get their job done.
So good morning, I am here to discuss ethnomethodology after Garfinkel and Sachs. It is stated here that scientific activity isn't really scientific at all, or does not use methods, or it does not use a systematic way to an activity. Rather, it all depends on the same kind of common sense thought as everyday life. So activity depends on the same kind of common sense. In addition, Harvey Stock's interest in language emerged. This is a study of conversation analysis, or CA. It refers to positivist and empiricist feel. It means that it has a legal theories, knowledge, and knowledge has come from sensory experience, or you need to feel, touch, or smell something in order to have knowledge about that thing. It has also a rigorous collection of data. It has an accurate collection of the data, the studies. Next. However, according to the ethnomethodologist, Lebenswelt of the actor has been replaced by a technology, so they are unhappy or disagree with the emerge of conversation analysis, because according to them, the actor or the agent has been replaced by technology. It vanishes the radical reflexivity, or it vanishes the relation with the self and the others, or the evaluation of the relationship, or the articulation of experiencing. So all of these are replaced by technology. Finally, ethnomethodological tradition, a number of studies of work finally emerged. It is the use of CA, or conversation analysis, to study settings like doctor's consultations, telephone, helplines, and school classrooms. It also detects how the kinds of devices allow people to get their job done, or it is study how the devices assist people in their jobs. The main purpose or the main study of this is the setting. It is where the interaction take place. It is where they organize their behavior. So next, we have ethnomethodology and phenomenology evaluation. So it is stated here that argues forcefully for the role of the actor in maintaining social order. So it means that actor is important to maintain social stability, or maintain the interaction of the people in everyday life. It also introduced everyday life as a key area of cultural research. It includes interaction of the people. So interaction of the people of everyday life is a key factor area to study culture. It is also stated here that culture is an inevitable aspect of our lives. So it means that culture is somehow a requirement in our aspect of our lives. So next, it has also a negative side. It includes the symbolic interactionism, the disadvantages of it. It is the ideas that power are weakly developed or non-existent. So it means that it reflects in ethnomenology and phenomenology the equality of the people. So it is a negative or a disadvantage, because ideas of power are weakly developed or non-existent. Also, they see culture as somehow immanent or directly emerged from it. So culture is directly emerged from it rather than a separate or independent system.
Good day, everyone. Hi, it's me again, Junrei, and I'll be reporting the micro-theories, a general evaluation. Micro-theories, a general evaluation focuses on individuals and small groups and the interactions between of them, and what is the differences between micro and macro theories. Micro theories examine the process of the face-to-face contact among individuals and personal points of view in society, whereas the macro theories deal with the large-scale social events of society, meaning things that have public concern. And here is the macro theories of culture in 3 master characteristics. Number 1, significance advance, meaning thinking of through how agency can be related to meaning. And the second was the impoverished and stunted understanding of culture. The third one, or the last one, is problem arise, meaning explaining how micro levels relate to the macro level.
To end this discussion, to further understand and elaborate this topic, you may read The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, Herbert Blumer's Theoretical Essays, and John Heritage Garfinkel and Ethnomethodology 1984. We are from the Group B and hope you learned something in our discussion.
Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Listening.